Got some news this morning about a big setback for Rivian, the company recalling nearly every vehicle it has delivered.
But this is an example of what can happen if you don't have a completely clean launch. And now you've got Rivian recalling about 13,000 vehicles.
In October 2022, the high-profile startup betting big on electric trucks and SUVs faced its biggest hurdle yet. The company notified customers that it was voluntarily recalling 13,000 out of the total 14,317 vehicles produced that year. Recalls happen all the time, but this one sent shares tumbling and raised investor eyebrows. After all, the company had gone public just a year prior at a market valuation of a whopping $86 billion, higher than the market cap of legacy automakers Ford and General Motors. Rivian is one of countless new car makers attempting to become the next big name in a rapidly changing automotive landscape. They're new to manufacturing. They don't have a dealership network. They're trying out new technology. New technologies make bold promises, but things can go wrong. And when they do, they can be costly. At least a few recalls have been devastating for automakers, and scores of victims. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, is the government entity tasked with investigating defects in cars, among other things. It issued about 1,100 recalls in 2021 for 34 million vehicles. So how do recalls work? How costly are they, and how do companies recover from them?
I'm Stephen Rodella. I'm the Director of the Office of Defects Investigation at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, also known as NHTSA.
Day to day, Rodella's colleagues comb through thousands of consumer complaints and other data looking for one of two things: vehicle features or parts that might not comply with the federal motor vehicle safety standards, or ones that are simply defective. If NHTSA determines a defect poses an unreasonable risk to safety, it will require the manufacturer to initiate a recall. That's if the manufacturer hasn't already. Just about every major car, commercial truck, and RV maker issues recalls, though some more than others. There have been times where automakers have been late to recall vehicles, yielding catastrophic results. George Ball, a business professor at Indiana University who studies recalls, says the recall of the Ford Pinto in 1978 is one such notable example.
You know, when I started researching recalls after coming to academia, that one really caught my attention because it's kind of a classic firm choosing profits, unfortunately, over safety. That is an extreme example, so I don't think it's fair to say that every recall a firm chose profits over safety.
The car was recalled because a design flaw in the fuel system created a fire risk. At the center of the controversy was a memo that indicated the company had predicted the number of injuries and deaths, the costs of the lawsuits resulting from them, and determined they were less costly than redesigning the vehicle.
But before academia, I was in medical devices, and I've made a lot of recall decisions, and I've advised. That type of thing would get, in the FDA's regulatory world, we'd get thrown in jail for those types of analyses.
A storm of public outrage, lawsuits, and an official count of 27 deaths ensued. Ford later recalled about 1.5 million Pintos and 30,000 Mercury Bobcat sedans and hatchbacks. The Pinto has had its defenders, though. One law review article from 1991 outlined a number of myths and misconceptions surrounding the Pinto's overall safety risks and Ford's role in the controversy. Once a recall is initiated, manufacturers have to notify customers of the recall and follow up with NHTSA on recall progress. Despite this, Rodella says only about 60 to 70% of recalled vehicles get fixed.
Which we don't feel is enough. We want 100% recall completion. We understand that there's a lot of reasons why people don't get recalls done, but it's just something that you should do almost like you're changing your oil or anything else on your car. Just check for recalls on a regular basis. If you have an open recall, you take it in the dealer and get it fixed.
Since 2008, at least 19 automakers have recalled about 67 million airbags made by Japanese supplier Takata after they were found to be prone to explosion. At least 22 people have been killed and more than 400 people injured in the US alone. Yet millions of unrepaired cars are still on the road. In November 2022, NHTSA issued yet another warning to owners to have their cars checked for potentially defective airbags after another fatal rupture. That Ranger was under a do not drive warning Ford and Mazda had placed on thousands of trucks back in 2018. The Ford Ranger explosion came days after Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, issued its own do not drive warning for owners of 276,000 Dodge Magnums, Chargers, and Challengers. The number of airbags affected, nearly 70 million, is staggering, as is the number of automakers. Everyone seems to have been using parts from the same company. According to one Bloomberg report from an anonymous source, the scandal could cost Takata up to $24 billion. While the company denied the claim, the criminal investigation and the lawsuits were mounting. Its stock tumbled, and the company never recovered. In 2017, Takata filed for bankruptcy. A year later, Key Safety Systems, an auto components maker, acquired Takata in a $1.6 billion deal.
Unfortunately, if someone had analyzed the risk that was being borne by these manufacturers, you could look at the supply chain and say, if this type of supplier has a quality problem, every single manufacturer is in trouble.
So investors really view recalls as part of the cost of doing business in the auto industry. They're very common. And so, there's not necessarily a whole lot of surprise when there's a recall announced. They're happening all the time.
They do, however, hurt the overall market performance of the automotive industry. Recalls are one of the main reasons why car company stocks trade at some of the lowest earning multiples of any industry in the market. In 2021, General Motors recalled all of its Chevrolet Bolt electric vehicles after several reports of batteries going up in flames.
Now that sent major warning flags across the industry, and especially because GM is making such a big bet on EVs. That recall cost GM $2 billion for 110,000 vehicles, roughly. So you do the math, that it costs them about $18,000 per vehicle. That's a very expensive one.
A recall like this won't cripple a company like GM, which has a broad portfolio of products and sells millions of vehicles every year. And in this case, the problem was the battery, which was supplied by LG Chem. GM recouped about $1.9 billion of the $2 billion it cost the automaker. But the cost was more than financial.
And it really shook the confidence in a lot of investors in GM. You'll hear their best-selling EV. We're having those kinds of issues, and making such a Mary Barra and the company making such a big bet on EVs being the future of the company, was, I think, sent some shockwaves throughout the industry.
Despite it all, sales have remained strong for the two Bolt models. The company reported record sales in the third quarter of 2022. GM said in a statement to CNBC, "The safety and trust of those who drive our vehicles is at the forefront of everything we do at General Motors. We have a culture where we focus on identifying and resolving an issue as quickly as possible to reduce the frustration and concern of impacted customers." While the Rivian recall involved a part that was relatively inexpensive and easier to fix, newer upstart companies don't have the same kind of cushion larger automakers have. Tesla has recalled 3.8 million vehicles in the US as of November 2022. That included a recall in February of every vehicle equipped with its full self-driving software. Ball and his colleagues have found recall announcements have a curious pattern to them. They occur in clusters. When one company announces a recall, others follow in close succession, even though their problems are unrelated. The team also found that the first company to issue a recall in these clusters suffers the greatest hit to its share price. Companies that closely follow the leader suffer less. They can't say that companies are doing this intentionally, but they do see a strong association.
And whether the executives are doing it on purpose or not, they definitely get a stock price benefit by following. And the closer in you follow, the better. The longer you wait, the market starts to forget about that leading recall. So if you wait a couple weeks, you're not going to get much of a benefit. But if you do it the day or two after, you get the most benefit.
Earlier research had found that a company's public image suffers more when it is otherwise associated with high-quality products. Toyota, for example, has a strong reputation for quality, and the hit to its public image appears to be larger than it would be for companies with lower consumer confidence. Building on this, Ball found that when companies with strong reputations issue recalls, a high number of companies follow them right behind.
Toyota has such a stellar quality reputation that their clusters last longest, so the number of days that they'll last, 37 days, and that's the longest of any firm, and they stimulate 10 following recalls, and that's more than any of the other firms.
A substantial challenge companies like Rivian and Tesla face isn't actually fixing problems. Many of these new automakers sell directly to customers and don't have the franchised dealership networks older automakers rely on. For its most recent recall, Rivian claimed it could fix the issue within 30 days.
Companies that don't have the established distribution networks, it becomes more expensive. They just don't have the infrastructure to deal with this. A lot of times they'll outsource to a third-party auto repair shop in order to make that fix, or they'll have a network of service providers that they rely on. So, but it certainly adds to the total cost of the labor involved.
Industry analysts have questioned whether these automakers can scale to the level of a Volkswagen or a Toyota without the dedicated dealership network. A major advantage of companies like Tesla and Rivian is their ability to diagnose and fix defects through software updates. That can save consumers a lot of time and hassle, but it can also threaten transparency, making it challenging for regulators like NHTSA to keep up. In addition, tech firms can also afford to pay engineers high salaries, whereas government agencies can't. Many areas that have seen rapid innovation and a lot of controversy are in advanced driver systems. Those pose a whole new set of questions. NHTSA has opened several investigations into crashes associated with Tesla's autopilot system.
Yesterday, I drove a brand new system being launched by a manufacturer, and it's posing challenges to us because we want to know what those systems are capable of. Are they safe when they deploy? And if there are issues with them, what questions do we need to ask to ensure that if there is a defect, that the manufacturer makes the appropriate determination and appropriate remedy?